Fanatics. Welcome back to another episode of Sports Fanatics United. I'm Eric, and this week my co-hosts Barb, Jerry, Keith, they're all taking the week off. But joining me today, I got two more great guests. We've got Kris Ginther, and we've got Richard Mauro. Guys, how's it going?
Good, brother. Glad to be here.
Appreciate you having us on. I don't know about good guests, but I'll do my best.
Oh, you'll be fine. So, since it's y'all's first time coming back onto the show and whatnot, Kris, I'll start with you. Give us your teams.
So for college basketball, I switched it up this year in honor of my dad. I'm rooting for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and it's been a little bit of a rough road, but they're hanging in there.
And what about your other sports, NFL and all those as well?
For NFL, rooting for the Patriots. For baseball, the Boston Red Sox. I know Keith loves hearing that. And then I also love the Las Vegas Golden Knights for hockey.
Awesome. How about you, Richard? Give us those teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Born and raised Ohioan, so I suffer for the Browns all year, every year. Big Cavs guy, so that's a little bit of light considering we're the best team in the NBA. Guardians through and through. Hockey, really could not care less. I like watching the Kraken, but other than that, I really do not pay attention to hockey much at all. College basketball, I stay true to my local teams. I went to the University of Akron, and I don't know if you guys have followed the MAC at all, but they're on absolute fire right now. Ohio State, Kentucky is my outlander. I don't know what made me start liking Kentucky, but I've liked them for some 15 years now, maybe a little longer.
I got to ask you this. Did you ever think that in your lifetime, you would be saying that the Cavs are the best team in the NBA and LeBron James is not on the team?
Absolutely not. And it's funny because I was watching a video yesterday, and the host of the video was talking about how he really got into the NBA, like truly in 02, 03. And that's exactly when Braun got drafted to Cleveland. And it's literally when I started picking up basketball as heavily as I do now. I mean, I'd follow the occasional games on TV if Jordan was playing or AI. I was a big Sixers fan for a little bit because of Iverson. But no, never thought we'd be this good without LeBron as long as he's active. And it's just been one win after another, and they've just been playing the best basketball I've seen them play.
Hopefully, you get to enjoy that just dream season a little bit longer. Man, you never know. Maybe in June you're raising up the Larry O'Brien Trophy.
Let's hope. I mean, I was watching the Knicks Celtics game earlier at 1 on ESPN, and all they were talking about is how it's the Celtics title to lose, and the Knicks need to make a run to make the playoffs. And I'm just sitting there like, the Cavs have 10 losses. They just beat the Knicks by 37. They don't lose very often at all, and when they do win, they win by 10 plus points almost every single game. And I just don't understand. I don't know why the Cavs and the Thunder just aren't getting the respect that they should be getting. And so I'm just going to hope that they prove it on the court. I don't really care what analysts say.
And that's exactly it. All right, so this episode today, we're going to give you a little bit of a men's college basketball conference tournament primer. Get you ready for the conference tournaments and up to Selection Sunday. Now, we will be recording an episode for Selection Sunday. We'll be actually watching the selection show live as it happens and giving our thoughts right then and there. But right now, like I said, before we get to that, we're trying to just give you a little bit of in case you're like some of us and you haven't watched a lot of college basketball this year, maybe this will be a little bit of let me consider these guys, these teams that these guys give me and whatnot, and let me look into them a little bit more. So, I guess we'll start off with this. Which team, which conference would you guys say probably has the deepest field going into their tourney this year? I'll start with you, Kris.
My bad. I couldn't get my mic unmuted. I think that it's pretty obvious that the SEC is just incredibly deep this year. So I would obviously take them. I mean, they are really deep. I'm surprised how many teams that they've put up for success to make the tournament. There's some other conferences that I'm really looking forward to. The Big Ten has a lot of teams. And just a big battle in the Mountain West there. There's a good 5 or 6 teams that I could see winning that. And then all you guys that follow the summit, which I'm sure there's several of you guys, probably nobody can name a single team there, but they have like Omaha, St. Thomas, the Dakotas. There's 5 teams there that I wouldn't be surprised if you told me any of those 5 teams won. Even 6. South Dakota's ranked number 6 there, and I wouldn't be shocked to see them win as well.
I'm a big fan of the Jackrabbits. That's all I care about in the summit. Every year, no matter what, in our conference tournament challenge, I'm always going to pick South Dakota State. I don't care. They could only win one game that year. I'm still picking South Dakota State just because I love that name, the Jackrabbits. But what you got for us, Richard?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to argue that the SEC is not the deepest team in the league. They just have, 5 people ranked in the top 10 or like 7 people ranked in the top 25. They just have like absurd numbers. And I've tried to determine who the best team in that conference is, and it's truly impossible. Obviously, you could say Auburn, considering their record, them being number 1 in the country. But then there's games where they just don't look like they're the true powerhouse that they could be. And then there's other games and they win by 40. So you truly have no idea who the top team in that conference is. Obviously, the Big Ten's deep as well. But when it comes to tournament play, the Big Ten, they're just non-existent. You maybe have one team get out of the first weekend, maybe 2, but they never make deep runs. And I cannot understand it. I don't know if it's the style of conference play. It doesn't translate to the tournament style where they're playing every other day, or what it is, or if it's the pace of these other conferences. But then again, when it comes down to it, if there's a Big Ten team in the Final Four, I won't be surprised by that. Then you got, all the other smaller conferences, you always have that 1 or 2 Cinderella teams that make runs. And to be totally honest, I don't think they're going to make the tournament at all. But I really was underwhelmed by Rutgers this year, just because out of their starting 5, you have 2 players that are probably going to go top 10 in the NBA draft after just 1 year of college play. And they just haven't translated as a team. I'm always a fan of a small team making a deep run. This year, I really hope it's Akron. Like I said, me being a homer and being 40 minutes away from there. But I would definitely think the SEC is the deepest and the ones who can probably do the most damage.
Now, if you all heard that, and I'm going to play this back when I fill out my brackets, but I'll try to remember. Don't be so heavy on the Big Ten teams, because that's probably gets me in trouble on my brackets a lot.
Yeah, definitely,
But
because you see these matchups, and you're like, okay, they should win that. And then you
yep,
watch the game, and then it's a 2-point game the entire time, and something happens, and then all of a sudden that Big Ten team loses.
I will say one good thing about this year, though. I don't have to worry about how far Virginia is going to advance because I don't think Virginia is going to be there. So for once, I ain't got to worry about is Virginia going to sink my whole bracket the first weekend. So let me go to this though. Y'all had mentioned heavily in your responses about the SEC. Now, how did this football powerhouse take over college basketball?
I can go ahead and take that one first. I think it really comes down to the transfer portal really helped the SEC. They had a lot of new players come in. You could especially say Auburn with Johnny Broom. He's just incredible for them. But I think a big shout out goes to the coaches that they've brought in for the SEC. I know you mentioned Virginia, which they still got a chance, Eric. They could win the ACC and make it all the way. You never know.
Let's not go there.
But you compare that to the ACC, and they didn't really get all these big name transfers, and I struggle to see more than 5 or 6 teams, and 6 is a big stretch heading to that tournament. So, normally ACC is the powerhouse for basketball. And I think that mixed with the coaches that the SEC brought in and mixed with the utilization of that transfer portal, I think that's what set up the SEC for success.
Because I was looking at getting ready for this episode. I was actually looking at standings and whatnot a couple of weeks ago, and I was shocked to see the amount of SEC teams in the top half of the top, not just in the top 25, in the top half of the top 25. And I think there was only when I saw two ACC teams, period, in the top 25. No, three. I forgot about Louis. It was Duke, Clemson, Louisville. But then, just like I said, the top half of and Auburn up there in the top five. I was like, wait, how out of touch am I with college basketball this year that Auburn is in the top five? I would have thought Auburn would be in the top five of the SEC, but that
Well, not only that, they got 10 teams with only single digit losses. I mean,
exactly,
they still
yep.
got Vanderbilt in there, and they got Coach Calipari at Arkansas. They got double digit losses, Texas double digit losses, and those teams could beat up on, the Big Ten, ACC, all these other top teams. So they're just incredibly deep this year.
I will say that's one thing that makes me smile, though. The fact that Arkansas has double digit losses and they thought they got their savior in John Calipari.
They did get Kentucky.
Oh, I could have stopped you there. John Calipari hasn't had it for years.
You'll get no arguments here. You're preaching to the choir here, brother. But Richard, the SEC, that's your conference right there. How did they become this powerhouse?
Like it's wild, like to think that they're as good as they are because they've always been a very like tight conference when it's come to basketball. They've always had very close games, even when you had those Kentucky teams where you were like, oh, how are they not the favorites? Even back when they had the Davis Wall teams talking 10 years ago. Like, even in conference play, those games weren't as far off as they looked towards the end. I mean, obviously, you get down to the last 2 minutes, you can do a lot of foul trouble type stuff, shooting free throws, things of that nature. But those games have always been close. And now I think, like Kris said, with the transfer portal, you don't have to really worry about trying to recruit these guys because you could just be like, hey, we'll pay you to come here. It's only a 1-year stop anyways. And these kids are like, yeah, absolutely. They know they're not there for long. They're not going to be there for 2-3 years. They're there to just play basketball for a year, make some money, and head to the league. So with that portal opening up, you have these conferences with their bigger booster pockets being able to pull these kids instead of, hey, listen, we produce NBA players like crazy. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, the draft's only 2 rounds. That's it. So you have 60 players, 64 players max going, and that's it. It's not like you have 7 rounds like the NFL. You don't have 37 rounds like the MLB. You have 2. So a lot of these guys they either go undrafted, they get picked up and make the team that way. They can decide if they want to stay in college or not. So now it's just about, okay, who's going to offer me the most money because I know I'm good. So it's only a matter of where I want to hang out for these 6 months of the season. So when it comes to the SEC, I mean, me personally, if I got to pick if I'm going to go hang out in the northern part of the states or the southern part of the states, I'm going to go where it's 70 all year long and not have to worry about it. And I think that's just starting to translate more and more. And kids are just like, oh, okay, I can go play in Arizona. I can go play in California. I can go play in Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn, like all these places. The biggest question to me is, does Alabama just have the deepest like pocketbook, not the school itself, but the state? Because you have all these schools located in Alabama, all these schools located right around Alabama, and they're just all good at basketball. So what is drawing all these recruits to that area? And I don't understand it.
That is a very good question because when you raise that, it's like, yeah, Alabama. Like, I mean, I don't get me wrong, Alabama has some redeeming qualities, I imagine, but it's not thought of as this destination of where you exactly would want to go to, either besides for college football, the University of Alabama and whatnot. But when it comes to college basketball, it's like You don't when you think college basketball, Alabama is not one of the states that you would think of in your list of top 5, top 10 states that you would think of, hey, this is a college basketball hotbed. But as you mentioned, with all those good teams, to see like they're in Alabama, it's like, what is it about Alabama that's bringing all the good basketball players there? I don't know. Maybe we should find it. We should just fundraise for a trip one day, Richard. Go down there and do some scouting for ourselves.
Oh, I'm down.
Well, I
Traveling,
heard a
I'm in.
story about Sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with Eric. I'm down if we're going to travel somewhere.
Oh yeah, we'll put it on Keith's credit card.
Absolutely.
I heard a story about Nate Oates, that's the coach at Alabama, just kind of his recruiting strategy. And they actually use the football program as a big part of their recruiting trips. They schedule a lot of top basketball players to come, go to those Alabama, Georgia football games. But he also draws a line there. You know, he's not just going to bring everybody to those games. So I think ever since Oates got there, they've just really taken off too. So that's just a big shout out to him. And obviously Bruce Pearl at Auburn knows what he's doing. He's consistently had Auburn on the rise for a while. Jabari Smith, I picked Auburn to go all the way that year, and they fell a bit short. I'm still a little bit bitter about that, but Bruce Pearl really knows what he's doing.
So let me ask you guys this now. Let's transition from the SEC. Let's go to the two-time defending champions, UConn. From what I'm not, they're not exactly. They're not bottom feeders, but it's not standard UConn basketball either. At least in the terms of their season. Do you see them making the tournament? Kris, I'll go with you first.
Yes, I definitely see them making the tournament. They have four, pretty solid wins. They're single-digit losses. I'd be surprised if they didn't win a couple in their own conference tournament. I'm just not a big Dan Hurley guy. I know some people really like his coaching. I don't know if you want to call him theatrics or just how he goes about coaching his team. I'm not a huge fan, but I respect UConn and their storied history there. And I do think that when push comes to shove, the committee will give them the benefit of the doubt and squeeze them in there.
Now, since you mentioned Hurley, I'll ask you this: did he make the right choice in sticking around?
I think kind of like what I said. Like, there's just such a rich history there. That's coaching stability, and at college, like with college hoops, if you can get some stability at any university, especially one of UConn stature, you take it. So yeah, he's not my favorite coach, but I definitely think he made the right decision there, and it's a great school to build a program.
What do you think, Richard? Does UConn make it?
Yeah, I mean, to say they're not going to make it is kind of crazy. I mean, like you said, they're the defending champs. I mean, they're out of the top 25 currently, but a few of those quality wins and like Kris said, those one possession games go the other way. Now you're talking, okay, they're in the top 25 with no problem. I mean, it's hard to deny a defending champ if they're on the bubble, because if you have a team that's a first or second round bounce and never makes it past the first weekend, and then you look at UConn, who obviously has won back-to-back titles, who always makes deep runs, who looks like they know what they're doing. As soon as tournament play happens, it's going to be a hard time to be like, no, they don't deserve in this year. So I definitely think they do make it. I mean, barring a catastrophic failure and they just lose out and lose in the first round of the tournament play, then okay. But I think they're going to be safe.
And do you think that Hurley made the right decision sticking around?
Yeah. I mean, have we ever had a coach leave after back-to-back championships in any sport? I mean, that's truly a question, because I don't think so, and I'd be very surprised. Or I'd want
to. I can give you one, but we're not going into that subject today.
All right, you'll have to tell me who it is later. But no, it's like it's hard. It's college basketball. It's you have guys that have coached in certain schools and one school for years. Like, we're not talking like they're there for 5 or 6 years. You're talking about guys that have been there for 10, 15, 17, 20 years. So if you built a home there and you feel comfortable and the school's behind you, it's really hard to be like, hey, I'm going to go take this job elsewhere. So I think he did make the right choice. And I think it would have been really hard for him to leave. Now, had they not won last year, I definitely think maybe he definitely might have left. I know that's contradicting all in itself, but I definitely think if he wouldn't have won last year, I think he would have been gone.
it makes you wonder too that now, because I mean his name was tied to that Lakers job last year in the off season, and now that the Lakers have gotten a talent like Luca, it makes you wonder: is he thinking, man, if I took that job, then I could be coaching this top three basketball player in the world. I mean, I obviously he's going to tell you in interviews, oh yeah, made the right decision, glad to stick around and whatnot. But you just wonder sometimes in the back of his head, like, is he thinking that? All right, let's go from UConn to another perennial college basketball powerhouse. Let's talk a little bit of Kansas basketball now. Is it time for Bill Self to ride off into the sunset, Richard? Or is it just a bad season?
So for whatever reason, I don't like Kansas. So yeah, absolutely go right off into the sunset, because this year I absolutely love that they just are falling apart. And I don't know if it's because one of my closer friends is a Kansas fan and we've always had that little rivalry, Kansas, Kentucky. But I don't know what happened to that team. They just cannot figure it out. And it just brings me a lot of joy.
I'll tell you one thing. I have not been high on Kansas ever since Mario Chalmers made that shot and sunk my chance of winning $500. So I'm with you there. But Chris, what do you think?
I think it's not time to hit the panic button on Kansas. I mean, they're still ranked. I think it's just kind of a down year so far. And I mean, we still got another season. There's a great coach that I was listening to, and you got 3 seasons of basketball. You got preseason, you got league, and you got the postseason. So we're not even into that third season yet. I mean, if you got Hunter Dickinson on your team, you're in good shape. Zeke Mayo is a really good guard. They just need some of these other guys to step up. Harris and Adams, they really haven't done as much as they need them to do. If you told me that Kansas went on a big run in the tournament, I wouldn't be shocked. Am I surprised where they're at in their conference? Absolutely. I would have never picked BYU to be above them right now. So should I be a little bit worried? Maybe, but I'm not quite hitting the panic button left. There's still a lot of basketball to be played.
That's fair. That's fair. Still, though, you know, if Kansas sits there and just not literally, we're not going there, but figuratively, if Kansas season just you know runs off the tracks here, I would not be sad. I would not be sad at all.
Yep, agreed.
All right, now let's actually talk about the actual upcoming conference championship tournaments themselves. Okay, the tournament started March 2nd, and is there any teams in any conference? You can just pick a couple of teams if you want that are maybe in the top 1, 2, 3 of the conference so far. Would be one of those seeds that you have an upset alert of as of most likely. There's a very good chance you're not winning this tournament, and now you're hoping to be an out large in the tournament. Chris, what do you think?
I think that well, I have 2 teams that came to mind, and both of them are surefire, NCAA tournament recipients. But the first one that came to mind was Michigan. Like they're number 2 in their conference, but when you look at their games, a lot of them are just so close and not against great teams. I mean, they even have a loss in there to Minnesota, overtime win against Northwestern. They're not really convincing me that, like, hey, I'm a top team. They're one of those teams that they can beat anybody, but also they can lose to anybody. And I don't see those teams normally winning their own conference tournament, especially in a Big Ten conference where there's a lot of teams that could win. So not a big Michigan guy heading into the conference tournament. The other one is the Texas A&M Aggies, which they're number 7 in the nation, and it's crazy to say they're only number 5 in their own conference. So again, I know we talked about the SEC, but that's just crazy to me. I love that they're led by 2 guards because I think that guard-led teams play really well in the tournament. They got Wade Taylor and Phelps. And what I've noticed is, the Aggies, they've lost their last 2 and they got blown out by Mississippi State. When Phelps doesn't score, like they are not very successful. So knowing that heading into the tournament, that's a big red flag for them. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those lower SEC teams ends up knocking them out before they even get to the quarters or semifinals.
Richard, I know that's music to your ears right there. We talk about Michigan, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I'll take Michigan losing any day of the week in any sport. I don't care what it is.
And twice on Sunday.
Absolutely.
But who would you got as a top team on upset alert?
This one might be a little bit of surprise, and it's not so much that it would affect anything when it comes to big time tournament play, but I would not be surprised if Duke doesn't win the ACC.
Oh, you're speaking. Well, that is a beautiful music to my ears right there. Keep
Absolutely.
talking, my brother.
And not because they're not.
Keith's about to
Yeah,
pull up.
oh, for sure. I think he's calling me right now, actually. Yeah, and it's not because they're not good. Obviously, they're phenomenal. I mean, going into this season, getting Flag, getting the other two freshmen they got, they are a very good basketball team. But when it comes to tournament play, it's the same that we talk about with professional sports when it comes to the playoffs. It's a different atmosphere, and you do run into veteran coaches and veteran players that have been there for a couple years that understand the speed of the game, the intensity, and like Kris said, it is another season. It doesn't matter what happened during your regular season because it's one and done now. There's no tomorrow. It's laid all on the line, and we've seen it happen year in and year out. And the one team that comes to mind is that Zion Barrett and Reddish team. Like,
Reddish.
yeah, everyone thought they were just going to run through the tournament. And
I think they had Trey Jones too.
yeah, they did. And so you're like, you look at that team on paper and you're like, how did this team not win the national championship? And that's kind of what comes to mind with Duke. Not saying they won't make a deep run. I actually kind of have them in going very far in the tournament, but I would not be surprised if they lost in the conference tournament itself.
I don't have a particular team I'd put on, but to take a point that both of you have made, it's like also sometimes you're thinking this team should just breeze through a tournament, but if now I know nobody's going to ever admit that they do this, but if you think about it, if you're one of those teams that you're 95% sure on selection Sunday your name's getting called, do we want that rest? Let's play one game, couple of games. We're not going to give it our all in this conference tournament because we know that March Madness we're playing there. Like in the back of your head, you think our team's going for rest over rust, and whatnot. They're not worried about coming out rusty because they got some injuries, they got stuff that they just want to work out, and get a little break before they get into the March Madness and whatnot. It makes you think.
That is a very good point because like in the pros, I've always said, especially with basketball, once you're coming down the stretch, do you kind of take your foot off the gas? Like once you're in it, do you kind of let up so you don't get hurt? Do you not, you don't get fatigued but it's hard to say with college, in my opinion, because I mean, I've always been a fan with college that you don't want the rest. You want to play every game like it's your last because you want to stay hot.
Right.
You want to
Right.
keep playing with that intensity, with that quickness and speed. You want to stay in your rhythm. So, but you do have to think like, I think it was yesterday. Oregon played Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was up. What was it, 17, 18? And down the stretch, Wisconsin turned the ball over, I think 11 times, maybe 13 times in the second half. And that game went into overtime, and Oregon ended up winning that. So it makes you think, like, what happened there? Like, did they get too comfortable of a lead? And Oregon was like, okay, no, like, we still have fight left. And that happens in the tournament every year. You think a game's over, and next thing you know it, you turn back around, and it's a 5-point game with 2 minutes left. So it's hard. I don't think for college that you want that rest period. You don't want to take any games off. You want to just fully prove how good you are every single night.
Yeah, you would hope that that's what they strive for, but I mean, I'd like to say apples to oranges here in this comparison. But we just saw this in the NFL with Kansas City Week 18 against the Broncos. They did everything basically besides stand out in the middle of the field saying we're not really going to play this game because we don't care.
Yep.
But
yep, exactly.
Well, all right. Let me ask you this now: any dark horses or sleepers in any particular tourney that people should be watching out for, Richard?
Oof. If I had to pick, I mean, I'll go full homer and say I'm never going to count Kentucky out. I just can't do it. Not that they're going to win, but Mark Pope has them playing really good basketball. And for me, I think a reach is them just getting past the first weekend because it's been years and I'm dying over here. So I just want them to get to the second weekend. To win it all, that's tough. I don't know. I think I think you could throw a dart and hit any of the SEC teams and be like, okay, that's fine. I could see them winning it because they all have their own style of play. They all have their intensity, and I truly think this year is a complete toss up. I don't think there's a true favorite. And going back to me thinking Duke could lose in the ACC conference, I think they could very easily win it all too, and nobody would bat an eye. And it's tough. I don't know. I will say my one ridiculous pick is that I think Akron runs through the MAC conference and they win the first game. Second game, but the first game for sure.
What about you, Kris?
Well, the dark horses I have for like their conference tournaments, the number one team that pops out to me, and I mean, they're 16-12, so this is a real dark horse here. But I really like the Villanova Wildcats. I mean, they got Eric Dixon. If you don't know who he is, he's a really strong forward. He averages about 23 a game. Like those players can win you those clutch time games, and they're probably not going to make the tournament unless they win out. So they'll be stealing somebody's spot for sure. They've beat St. John's, they've beat UConn, they've beat Marquette, and they've came close with Creighton. That's all the top teams in that conference. So I would not be surprised if Villanova ends up winning that conference. The other kind of dark horse that I had was Missouri. I know they're like number 5, 6 in that conference, and especially in a deep SEC. But they've taken out Kansas, Florida, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. They even got Alabama. If you guys follow at all, the coaches on the microphone, hey, stay off the court, stay off the court. That's a really big win for them. I mean, they played Auburn and got absolutely smashed, but everybody's due for an off game. The number one thing I love about it is they get so many steals. They generate about 10 per game. That's huge, especially in those big games. Ball security, taking care of the ball. If you can get those extra possession, that really helps you. And then the last team I got, I mentioned them a little bit earlier, being above Kansas, and that's BYU. They don't really have anybody as far as player personnel that's going to like really wow you, but they play so hard and they are so tough. They did take out Kansas, Arizona, and they had a really close one with Texas Tech. So I'm really interested to watch all three of those in their conference tournament. And I think that 2 out of the 3 can make the Big House tournament. Villanova, I really do think they have to win out.
I would love to see another Virginia Tech stunner in the ACC. Not going to happen this year at all, most likely. But if it if it happens, I would be over the moon. I don't care. I wouldn't care what happened in the tournament. If that happens, and if they beat Duke on their way there, that would just make it the cherry on top of the sundae.
What about a Virginia Tech final for the ACC championship?
No, because that means Virginia won too many games to get there. All right, let me ask you this. In any conference tournament coming up, what's your one team that is your guaranteed stone cold lock to win that tournament? Kris, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I know there's one, but I'm taking 2 just because one's really easy to me. So the Ivy League, I'm taking Yale. They're just far and above the best team in that conference. I know not a lot of teams follow the Ivy League until they get to the tournament, but Yale has just been taking care of business all over the place. They're 11-0. I'd be shocked if they didn't win that tournament. The other one is the Southland Conference, and if you look at McNeese State, wow, they've got a lot of talent there. So I'd be very shocked if they didn't win as well. So those are my 2 locks.
What about you, Richard? Who you got?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Kris on Yale. They've just been in and out every night, just like he said, taking care of conference play and been doing what they are supposed to do. The other guarantee I will say is, once again, the Akron Zips. They've just been playing stellar basketball and have been able to just reload the team from last year. after losing Enrique Freeman, who now plays for the Pacers. And they've just been handling it. And I don't see any team in that conference being able to beat them once conference play starts, just the way they've been playing. So I would say they win without a doubt. And then real quick, just going back to that last question about any dark horses, for whatever reason, I absolutely love Caleb Love. And if Arizona can make a run, it's going to be because of him. 100%. They should have won that game last night against BYU. They lost by 1, and they called a foul on the floor instead of an and 1. And I still don't understand how they called the foul on the floor. And that would have been the game winner with seconds left with him shooting a free throw. Instead, they had to put the ball back on the floor with, I don't know what it was, like 2.6 seconds, and they had to force a shot, even though he just won it. So I do expect Arizona to be a very good threat coming out of the Big 12.
Curry in favor to avoid Barb's wrath. I'm with you there, brother.
Could you imagine that team if Omar didn't leave to Indiana? They'd be so fierce.
Or if Caleb Love would have stayed in North Carolina, because he left Carolina too. So it's like he's just a very good basketball player. I'm excited to see the future that he has.
Well, I would say this, and I mentioned this earlier, but no matter what year, what tournament, my stone cold lock every year is that Summit League, as Kris mentioned. But except I'm going, once again, South Dakota State Jackrabbits.
Lock it in.
Yep, lock it in. No reason whatsoever. Just besides, I just love their name. That's it. All right. So let me ask you guys this now. Break down, if you can, how many bids will each conference get? Kris, I'll go with you first.
All right. And again, I have no idea on the math here. This is just, my assumption. I'm so glad I'm not on the committee this year. But I'll go with the four big conferences there. So the ACC, I think they get at least 4 teams. I'm looking at Duke, Clemson, and Louisville. They're all locked in. And SMU or Wake Forest, they'll award 1, if not both. So I'm looking at 4 teams there, maybe 5. Big 12, I got 6 teams making it. Houston, Texas Tech, Arizona. I think Kansas is a lock. Iowa State's definitely a lock. The one team that I'm a little bit iffy on is BYU, although I do think they find them a spot. The Big 10, I got 7 to 8 teams going in there. There's just so much talent there. They have a lot of big wins. And heading into the tournament, when you have to play a tough conference like that, it really helps you out. But kind of like Richard was saying, like they don't really make a whole lot of noise in the tournament, so maybe this is their year. And then the SEC, get ready for this number. I got 10 teams making it. They have 9 that are already ranked, and then Vanderbilt's the 10th. If they want to throw Arkansas or Texas in there, I would be very surprised, but also not surprised. Just because, like I said, you're playing the best of the best, all conference long. Those 6 to 8 losses, that makes sense when you're playing those teams. So that's what I got there.
What about you, Richard?
Kris pretty much nailed it, in my opinion. Spot on Big 12, I have about 6, I believe. Yeah, I think so. Right now, you figure Houston as the best in the conference, and Kansas being the 6th. So I think all 6 of those teams do make it. The Big East, I could see if the committee has that soft spot for UConn, which, like I said, I do think they will. I see maybe 3 or 4. Let me see here. Where would it go? Oh, there we go. Yeah, Big 10, I got, like he said, you can't figure many just because of what they do every year. So the committee, I think, will take that into consideration. That, yeah, they're good in the regular season and once they play each other, but how deep can they truly go? And are we stealing a spot for college sports favorite conference in the SEC? So I think if it comes down to, should we put this 20-8 Oregon team in, or should we put, Vanderbilt in? I think they're going to lean towards Vanderbilt to where they can very easily kick them out. So the Big Ten are probably 5, maybe 6, and then the SEC could be countless. I mean, you could probably fill an entire region of the bracket with SEC play and just have another SEC tournament. But 9-10 is a very good number there. I do see them putting a lot in. And as we know, college loves the SEC. So
Yes, they
I
do.
would not be surprised, especially now that there's been all that talk about college football and how teams shouldn't have made it for the SEC and all that other stuff. So I could see them making up for it come basketball time, come tourney time. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, the little conferences, you never know. They might sneak out 1 or 2. But as for the big ones, I think that's what you're going to get.
I got a quick question for you, Richard. You talked about them earlier, but it's kind of been on my mind since you said it. Like back to Rutgers, I mean, they got Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Those guys are incredible. How on earth do they have a losing record? Like, would you be surprised if they win that Big Ten tournament and steal a spot?
No, not at all. I mean, they like exactly like you said, they're NBA caliber players. They could be in the league right now. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's coaching, I don't know if it's system, I don't know if it's the role players around them, but they cannot produce. Like they're what, 12 and 13 maybe, or 13 and 14, something like that. They just
Yeah, 13 and
Yeah, they
14.
just cannot get it together. But those two together are two of the better players in college basketball, and they just haven't figured it out. I truly don't. But if they won and that's what I love about the conference tournaments, because all you have to do is get hot. You get hot,
Yep.
next thing you know it, you're in the tournament, and you could be the best team going into the tournament because of what you did to get there. Now, obviously, them being a bottom seed of the tournament, they'd be playing a lot of games in a little bit of time and just be riding on momentum. But with those two, you never know, because every year you have NBA caliber players that carry these teams into the tournament. And when you have when you have two NBA caliber players, anything could happen. So I truly would not be surprised if they won the Big Ten. I don't think they will, but if they did, no complaints from me.
I mean, yeah, that's a team that they almost got Alabama and Texas A&M, who we know are two of the top teams in the nation. But this is also a team that lost to Kennesaw State. Like, I don't know what is going on in that locker room. I don't want to be there. I don't want to know what's going on. I don't know how that
No,
happens. I mean, like you said, two NBA caliber players, like top picks, and you're not even going to make the tournament.
yeah,
That's almost unheard
yeah,
of.
it's crazy. And it's almost like when they lose to those teams like Kennesaw and the smaller schools, or the games that they lost that they shouldn't have, it makes you wonder, like, okay, is it like an attitude wise? Like, is it just because they know they're that good? They read, I mean, anybody that thinks players stay off media is absolutely crazy, because players see it. Even if they don't want to see it, you see it. Like, I don't know how many updates I
Mhm.
get a day on things I truly do not care about. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And so, they get it because that's their livelihood. That's every single day. So, and they want to know what these players are. And then they've been playing with all these other players in AAU basketball, high school, leading up to all this. It truly amazes me how many players know other players because of past tournaments that they played in growing up. So I don't know if they're like, oh, okay, they don't have anybody. We're just going to breeze through this game. But then for those smaller schools, when they play these type of teams, that's their championship. They're like, okay, we're going to prove how good we are because we're going to beat them. And then I think it just kind of shell shocks them. It's like they just got punched in the jaw and they don't know how to recover from that. And I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about 17, 18, 19-year olds trying to gel together and put it all together with 2 or 3 guys they've never played basketball with. So it happens. I mean, obviously being a Kentucky fan, I see one and dones yearly, and I've seen us lose some ridiculous games. And I just sit there and question why I'm still a Kentucky fan and not a fan of like UConn, who brings back 4 to 5 players every single year.
Yeah. Yeah, and Eric, kind of your original question there. I mean, the other thing that comes to mind, especially this year, is who are those like first four out? Like, how many of these spots are getting stolen by those teams that get hot and make those tournament runs? Because I mean, we both agreed like 10 teams from the SEC is not unheard of, and frankly, they should have 10. But how many teams are going to steal those spots and who gets pushed out? That's something that we'll want to watch for.
Yeah, especially yearly when you see the number of regular season number one teams in those smaller conferences that lose in their conference tourney, and now they're out of the NCAA tourney. They're going into the NIT, and those are going to be the first ones. But then it's going to be how many of those mid majors, and then like the Big 12 and whatnot. That how many of those teams are going to get kicked out just because, like you said, when those teams that get hot take those spots. Well, if if a spot gets taken, somebody's losing a spot. So, but thinking about it while y'all were talking, I just came up with this brilliant marketing idea for the Big Ten. They should go to the selection committee and say, "Hey, every year give us 10 teams. That way, the Big Ten name means something."
Yeah.
10 from the Big 10, 12 from the Big 12.
Yep. See, there you go, Richard. I'll split some of the money with you if they ever go through with it.
All right, deal.
They're gonna start making Big 20 conferences if we start going that route.
But I will give y'all. So I was grading your assessments as well. Now y'all didn't have Virginia Tech in, so that's a minus. But you didn't put Virginia in either, so that's a plus. So you balanced out, so we can have you back on the show.
Oh, perfect.
All right, I guess now my next question is just going into these conference tourneys. Are there any bold predictions that you want to give out?
Oof. I mean, I kind of talked about it earlier, and I truly think if you can guarantee a winner and you do not think that anybody can touch them, I think that alone is a bold prediction, just because we see it every year. There's never one team that runs through the tournament. We have teams that get close. I mean, obviously, UConn winning back-to-back years, and last year they didn't have a necessarily rough time, but there were some games where you're like, okay, they're not playing as well, and at the end of the day, they did win it. But when it comes to bold predictions, it's just I'd be very surprised if like we've been talking about this whole time, if the SEC does not win the tourney, just because of how deep they are. So then it just comes down to chances. I mean, if you have a 1 in 10 chance to win a team and win a tournament and there's only 64 teams total, you got pretty good odds. So I don't think there's really a true bold prediction from my end this year that I can really think of outside of being a complete homer. So I'll leave it at that.
I had two kind of bold predictions. One, and it pains me a little bit because I do like Gonzaga, but I think their streak of making it deep in the tournament ends this year. If you told me that they lost in the first round of the West Coast Conference tournament and didn't even get in the NCAA tournament, that wouldn't shock me just because they have played so poorly this year. So that's just kind of a disappointment. I know it's a little bold because we're used to seeing them go a little bit deep every year. But I'd be shocked if they get out of like the second round. It's just one of those years for them. The other bold prediction that I have is no ACC teams in the Final Four, and I really don't even know if it's that bold this year. But like Richard, you and I talked, those conference games with the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, like those are battles, man. Even in the Big East, absolute battles, and they fuel you and battle test you for the NCAA tournament. The ACC hasn't really had that. Nobody's really putting up battles against anybody. Duke's rolling by everybody. I know Clemson got them once, but I mean, I'm pretty sure they've just dominated everybody. So I don't know if that helps Duke or hurts Duke. I'd lean towards hurting. They're going to get a team that is battle tested, and I'm really curious how Cooper Flagg and the rest of the team does against them.
I would love to watch the games and someone just punches Duke right in the mouth. It's just the chef's kiss.
I'll tell you what, if Gonzaga doesn't make it deep in the tournament, it will be a huge fresher breath air for me because every single year I, for whatever reason, cannot stand them. So I will be very happy if they don't make the tournament or don't make it out of the first round, like you guys said, or don't even make the tournament. You will have no complaints from me.
They won't hurt my feelings either because them jokers have sunk some of my brackets as well.
Yep.
So if they're out the way, that's one less seat. That's like one less bracket buster that I have to worry about picking about.
Yep.
Uh, all right. So now focusing back on the individual conference tournaments, you don't have to give a pick for all 31 if you don't want to, but do you hit just some of your winners that maybe you have for the individual conference tourneys if y'all want to give that? Kris, I know you got them lined up.
Yeah, I'm not going to give away too many because I'm trying to regain my title. But I will give away three. I do have Duke. I know you guys talked earlier about if they take it seriously. I think they'll take getting a high seed seriously, and they're talented enough that they should win that ACC. So I really like them there. I really like St. John's. It really doesn't matter. Who Pitino is playing. If Pitino's the coach, I'm leaning towards him. He proved that when he took Iona to the tournament. I love Rick Pitino. He's my favorite coach. So happy he's back in New York at St. John's. I really like them. St. Mary's is my third one. I think the WCC is tough. And, San Francisco and Santa Clara have a lot of three-point shooters. Oregon State could even get in there, but I really like St. Mary's. They're well coached by Coach Bennett, and I really like their chances to win that WCC this year.
How about you, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to agree with him on two of them for sure. I definitely think Duke wins the ACC. I definitely think St. Mary's wins the West Coast. I'm going to go ahead and predict the ACC just because of the fun in it for me. I'm actually not going to take, not the ACC, I'm sorry, the SEC. And I do think that Auburn does get taken down. And for whatever reason, I do like Alabama to win the SEC tournament. And that pains me because obviously being a Kentucky fan, I just don't think we have it. As for the MAC, I'm going to go Akron. And as for the Horizon League, I'm going to go YSU because, Homer. I'm trying to think. Yeah, and like Kris said, I mean, obviously we're all in that tournament challenge ourselves. So as for the smaller ones, I think I'm not going to give it away of who I'm taking.
Yeah, because those smaller ones are where you win the tournament, where you win that challenge.
Yep, absolutely is. I mean, you're going to have people that don't take Duke that just are trying to hope, but yeah. So hopefully it's a good time, and maybe Akron and YSU will get paired up. That'd be a fun little game.
I'll tell you one thing: I'm not taking Duke in that challenge. Yeah, it almost take an act of Congress to get me to pick Duke. But all right, so I actually am still in the process of trying to figure out who I'm going to pick for that tournament challenge. So I asked ChatGPT to give me some of its thoughts on who it thinks will win some of these tourneys, and let me give you those teams. So for the ACC, they have Duke, of course they do. It's almost like Duke paid them.
They probably did.
For the SEC, they've got Auburn. For the Big Ten, it's got actually has Michigan for the Big Ten.
Okay.
All right, for the Big 12, it's let me reading this. Oh, okay. They picked Texas Tech for the Big 12. I think Chat GPT is a little confused because it also has the Pac-12 here.
Who'd they have? Just curious.
For Arizona for the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe that's who they meant for the Big 12. We don't know. Maybe that's the final right there.
Maybe so.
Better go throw some money on it.
And for the Big East, they have Creighton. And finally, actually, for the Mountain West, they've got Boise State.
Wow.
Boise State over New Mexico, as a matter of fact. And then the American Athletic Conference, I think they're confused again because they got Houston. Houston's winning 2 tourneys.
Well, they got 3 Big 12 teams winning tournaments,
Yeah.
so must be a big Big 12 year.
West Coast, they've got St. Mary's. And finally, in the A10, they got VCU.
I've always had a soft spot for ACU or VCU. I mean, I don't know why.
Hey, those my boys right there.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech, I love them, but I love VCU too. I need to go up there one day and go catch a game there. But it's just like every time I think about it, it's either weather, it's just either a bad time for me to go, or by the time I've realized it, it's too late in the season.
Yep.
What next year? I'm putting it in my calendar. Next year, I'm going to go watch a VCU game in Richmond.
I'm
What?
gonna hold you to that.
Yeah. We will pull. If I don't go by this time next year, we're going to pull this tape, and you are allowed to let me have it.
One thing I did want to add with those conference tournament, Eric, is that like I know Richard talked about it, but the SEC is going to be so much fun to watch. I agree. Auburn probably won't win, and that's okay. Like that's not a shot at Auburn at all. I wouldn't be surprised if Missouri won. Like I said, the dark horse earlier, or Tennessee has so much talent with Zakai Ziegler, and they just have a lot of really good players that play hard together. But SEC is wide open. It's going to be so much fun to watch. And if it's like the last couple of years, I think that the SEC is one of the last tournaments to be played too.
Yeah, it finishes up on that Sunday, right? I think right before
Yeah.
the selection show.
Yeah, the national championship for the SEC is always at like 1 or 2 or something like that, and the show's that Sunday night, right?
Yeah, because the SEC is in the early part of the window because the Big Ten is always one of those. I think is the very last tournament before they go right to the selection show.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yep.
You're right. Yeah, I'll be using my mulligan on there because I'm probably going to go Homer and go with Nebraska.
All right, well, let me ask y'all this. Since Kris just mentioned it, it's a great question now. Besides the big conferences like the ACC, SEC, and whatnot, is there any conference tournament, like if someone's listening, it's like, all right, suggest one conference tournament that I will be able to tune in and I'll enjoy it from start to finish. One conference tournament that you would recommend.
I can go ahead and go. I think I mentioned them earlier just for when we were saying like deep conferences. And ChatGPT also mentioned them. The Mountain West. I think the Mountain West is just going to be so exciting to watch. You got 5 or 6 teams that could really win that. I think it just will be some exciting basketball. No real big favorite there. Really, if like you said, Boise State, they're 5th in the conference. I would not be surprised if they won. And they usually find a way to make the tournament. So that should be a really exciting tournament to watch, the Mountain West.
So just one tournament for me. I mean, for our listeners, Richard, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the MAC. I mean, obviously just because of Akron being in there, but every game is fun to watch. Like the other day, I thought Kent State was going to win the last game they played. I can't remember who they played, but they ended up losing that game, and it kind of shocked me because they were the better team. And just from watching,
I think it was Miami, Ohio.
I think it was. I think that's exactly what it was. And but yeah, no, I just think the MAC is always fun to watch. You just have a lower level schools playing, and some of those tournament games. And I've been to multiple MAC tournament games, and everyone is from start to finish just hustling and basketball. That's all it is.
Well, guys, any more last words that y'all want to add in before we close this episode?
Nothing in particular. It's been a blast. Love talking basketball. Love doing these with you guys. It's a pleasure being on here. If you guys ever want to get into the deep rooted hatred for NBA teams in particular, let me know. I'll come on gladly and probably talk the entire length of the show.
Jerry, if you're listening, add that to the list. Kris, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think if you're just a casual basketball fan, this is the year to tune in. There are so many great teams, and I know people say this every year that it's anybody's to win, but this year it really is. There's not like an Anthony Davis type of player that's going to completely dominate the tournament and will them to a victory. It could be anybody this year, and I think it's going to be so exciting. We're going to see a lot of close games, buzzer beaters, overtime thrillers. I'm just really excited. It's time for everybody to call in those sick days and fake some injuries for the tournament.
Yep.
I think I'm coming down with something now, but I'll let you know for our next episode. I'd like to thank Kris, Richard. I'd like to thank y'all one more time for coming on. And next time, we'll be back with our MLB previews. We'll start with the National League. Barb, Keith, and Jerry should be back by then. And these guys, Richard and Kris, they'll be on there as well for some of them. Until next time, Fanatics, I'm Eric.
I'm Richard.
And I'm Kris. Thank you.